Hello and welcome to This Week in Bitcoin. There are two main topics this week, so let's get stuck into them right away. News topic number one is a very interesting comparison between gold and Bitcoin because both have had a similar price chart and a similar development in the last couple of months. And specifically interesting with gold is the fact that it now reached a new all-time high. And if you actually take a closer look, you will soon realize that in the last 2 years, or 18 months and specifically, central banks have been buying a lot of gold, according to the World Gold Council. Why should central banks now buy a lot of gold? Well, gold is usually hedged against uncertain times, maybe with high inflation, maybe with war situations, and generally speaking, gold has been the go-to protection asset you would use in these uncertain times. Seeing now that central banks are actually following that idea and that they have been buying gold doesn't really send a strong signal into the markets. And we've seen that over the last 3 months as well. While gold continued to rise, Bitcoin followed as well. We'll get into that why. Other equities and other things have been improving as well, but they were very volatile. Not really a great fit if you want some protection. Gold, on the other hand, has been ripping due to the increased buying demand from central banks. Now, whenever we've seen these all-time highs approach with gold and seeing central banks hoard, you would usually have an indication that the next couple of months, if not years, will not be as smooth as maybe in the past. Interestingly enough, Bitcoin has had a similar price chart. Charles Edwards, the founder of Capriol Investments, has actually taken a closer look at this chart, which you will see now, and he explains that this is very similar to summer 2024. And considering where Bitcoin was during that time and where it is today, we did see an increase in new wallets being created, higher volumes, and of course, a higher price measured in fiat because of that. And if we now consider that people are buying gold and from the looks of it also Bitcoin, it makes for a very interesting case whether Bitcoin is still a risk on asset, as many people say it is, or whether it already took in the state of also being a further protection asset. We don't know at this time whether people buy a 50-50 split of like so much gold and so much Bitcoin, or maybe a little bit more gold and a little bit more Bitcoin. However, looking at the data, it's quite obvious that big investors, whether that be central banks, institutions alike, are preparing for troublesome time, and they have also taken a keen interest in Bitcoin. And that keen interest also moves into the second news, and that is that 23 states in the US have now either proposed a bill to set up a strategic Bitcoin reserve or have already voted on the bill in their own states. This is a vast improvement from just a year ago, where we had 3 or 4 states who had actually proposed this. So considerably more interest and a lot of actually groundwork to get all of that legislation done, to speak to politicians and to speak to all of the chambers involved in that. And if you now take a closer look at these 23 states, you would come up to a total of 242,787 Bitcoin that could potentially be bought. That's an enormous sum and buying pressure, considering that it's close to Strategy, formerly known as MicroStrategy, and BlackRock's ETF Bitcoin holdings, which have a little bit more. But if a lot of that buying pressure comes on, you would obviously see more adoption and Bitcoin being more broadly used also in the political landscape. For us Bitcoiners, this is an absolute no-brainer. We know how strong Bitcoin is as a strategic reserve asset. However, it now opens up the possibilities for others to also get involved. There are also some critics like Paul Huber in the NZZ in Switzerland who said that Bitcoin and especially states would be the last resort. I would argue, Mr. Huber, that is not the case. The last resort to actually safeguard your future, from the looks of it, is Bitcoin, and that's what more states in the US and potentially in the world have begun to realize. Will we see a lot of that increase and potentially more states? We need to wait for that, but super interesting to consider that within just 12 months, a lot of that political demand for Bitcoin has increased as well. And with that, we're at the end of this week in Bitcoin. You know the drill. If you got questions, feedback, or just want to say hello, leave me a comment below, and I look forward to seeing you next week again.